Hello again everybody, and welcome to Gnostic Currents. This is going to be the second video here and I wanted to talk about why we don't believe, or some of us don't believe, that Shakespeare wrote the plays. William Shakespeare of Stratford wrote the plays attributed to him for over 400 years now. We learnt during the first video that obviously there are quite a few reasons to doubt. And there's a huge gulf between what we know about William Shakespeare, or what we think, we know about William Shakespeare, and the actual record, the historical record, and what that teaches us. This video here is going to show us a little more about what we don't have, and about exactly how much speculation there is over his that authorship, and why. In a further video, I'm going to begin to talk about who we believe was the real Shakespeare, and that it might have been a collaborative effort, but there does seem to be one individual who sticks out most for the majority of the plays, and it does actually dovetail quite neatly into my work on Gnosticism, because the individual involved had people around him, and certainly does display a lot of characteristics which show us that he wasn't just a Renaissance Christian, that he was a leading light, and was thinking certainly outside the box. In certain of his works, we can see that there are certainly very alchemical, occult themes. So I'm going to have a look today at Diana Price's research. And this is from her book. She put out a book called Shakespeare the Unorthodox, or Shakespeare's Unorthodox Biography, and I'm just going to quote a few passages from the book I actually referenced last week. But this is going to provide a good series of bullet points, and we're going to compare. And we will read at some length, and it will show you what's what. But we have already established, obviously, that 6 shaky signatures, nothing really conducive to Shakespeare being an intellectual man or having any literary kind of connections in his will. The breadth of knowledge displayed in his plays, just it makes it very hard for you just to assume that William Shakespeare of Stratford was that figure who wrote the works. I mean, there's so much knowledge in medicine, in law, in history, in court, in the aristocratic courts, in botany, in falconry, and so on. It's hard to fix this fella from Stratford as the author. No commendatory verses again upon his death, nothing until 7 years after he died in the first folio, which does have a few hallmarks that look like there's a deception going on, and I haven't covered that yet. But if you go to Alexander Waugh's YouTube channel, you are going to be able to find quite a lot of those. Very interesting. Anyway, here it is. Again, we're going to quote an extended piece. It's not going to be too long, but I did want to give this some attention. So, in Shakespeare's Unorthodox Biography, New Evidence of an Authorship Problem, scholar Diana Price compared existing evidence for the writing careers of 24 of Shakespeare's contemporaries with the evidence or lack thereof for Shakespeare's supposed writing career. The comparison group included Ben Jonson, Edmund Spenser, Gabriel Harvey, Thomas Nash, Robert Greene, George Chapman, Thomas Dekker, Thomas Hayward, John Marston, Francis Beaumont, John Fletcher, Samuel Daniel, George Peele, John Lilly, Thomas Watson, Christopher Marlowe, Thomas Kidd, and others. Price's findings organised into 10 categories of revealing. Here is a summary, and I've got the 10 categories in front of you at the moment. 1. Evidence of education exists for 18 of 24 of Shakespeare's contemporaries. Shakespeare, none. No record shows he ever attended any school. He may have attended the Stratford Grammar School, at least for a time, but all records for the period are lost. Records survive for Oxford and Cambridge universities, but none place him at either. Outstanding grammar school boys like Marlowe could win scholarships to the college. Nothing shows that anyone thought Shakespeare was a good student of any sort of student. His success as a businessman and actor with the Lord Chamberlain's men and King's men suggest he could probably read, but his alleged signature suggests he could barely write. The absence of any surviving letters in his hand suggests he probably did not write. His detailed will containing no bequest for education suggested he didn't value education. Number 2. Record of correspondence, especially concerning literary matters, exists for 14 of the 24 contemporaries. Shakespeare, none. Not one letter in his hand has ever been found. One letter addressed to him survives. It requested alone, and it was unopened and undelivered. It did not relate to literary matters. Price notes that nearly every play mentions letters, so we know the dramatist considered correspondence part of everyday life. Shakespeare divided his time between London and Stratford, a situation particularly conducive to letter writing. So this gap in his records is doubly suspicious. There is no record of correspondence between Shakespeare and any of his collaborators. Number 3, evidence of having been paid to write exists for 13 of 24 contemporaries. Shakespeare, none. No record shows that any William Shakespeare was ever paid to write. Number 4, evidence of a direct relationship with a patron exists for 15 of 24 contemporaries. Shakespeare, nothing, none. Zara, zilch, nada. Venus and Adonis, 1593, and the Rape of Lucrece, 1594, were dedicated to Henry Rosalie, 3rd Earl of Southampton. Oxford scholars say the dedications show that Shakespeare sought patronage from Southampton and received it. In fact, no record shows that Shakespeare ever had a patron, not Southampton or anyone else other than King James I, patron of the King's men, not to Shakespeare personally. Orthodox scholars spend years searching records relating to Southampton, hoping to find something to document their relationship. They found nothing. 2 dedications by themselves do not constitute evidence that the men ever met. Prince interprets the line that some cite as evidence that they did meet as follows. In the dedication to Lucrece, Shakespeare wrote that the warrant I have for your honourable disposition made his poem assured of acceptance. In other words, Shakespeare had heard reports of Southampton's presumably generous disposition. Writers often made overtures to potential patrons by professing that they had been assured of his lordship's disposition or that ladyship's generosity. In contrast, she gives this example by a man who did have Southampton as a patron. John Florio dedicated his Italian-English dictionary, A World of Words, to the most honourable Earl of Southampton, in whose pay the patronage I have lived for some years. She notes that even Orthodox scholar Gary Taylor thought that one might as reasonably say that the dedications express a desire, hope, expectation that the chosen patron would take note of the poems. Number 5, original manuscripts exist for 10 of 24 contemporaries. Shakespeare, none, nor is any poem or play manuscript mentioned in his will. Number 6, written inscriptions, receipts, letters, touching on literary matters exist for 14 of 24 contemporaries. Shakespeare, 0, nothing. 7, commendatory verses, epistles, epigrams, contributed or received exist for 20 of 24 contemporaries. Shakespeare, none. Shakespeare wrote no commendatory verses and dedicated no play to anyone, nor to Elizabeth I, nor James I, patron of the King's Men acting company. No other writer wrote commendatory verses or dedicated works to Shakespeare. Almost uniquely among Elizabethan poets, Shakespeare remained silent following the death of Elizabeth, and wrote no verse commemorating the ascension of King James I, nor did he write a eulogy on the death of Prince Henry, the popular heir to the throne. 8. Miscellaneous records referred to personally as a writer exist for all 24 contemporaries Shakespeare. None. 9. Evidence of books owned, written or borrowed or given exist for 10 of 24 contemporaries Shakespeare. None. Traditionalists assume that Shakespeare's books never mentioned in his will were listed in an inventory now lost. This is unlikely. No book that Shakespeare owned or that is known to have been in his possession has ever been found. 10. Notice that death as a writer exists for 10 of 24 contemporaries Shakespeare. Absolutely nothing. Prints included evidence up to 12 months following death. The fact that the record is silent for over 7 years following Shakespeare's death suggests that his fellow actors, shareholders and the writers of his day knew that he was not Shakespeare. If he was Shakespeare, he should have been eulogized and buried in Westminster Abbey. This evidence is summarized in the chart of literary paper trails below, and I've got that in front of you now. Documentation of the information in the chart is in the revised edition of Price's book. Conclusion. Diana Price found evidence for the literary careers of 24 contemporary writers, but no comparable evidence for Shakespeare's alleged literary career relative to his peers. Her criteria derive from what exists for them, not on a priori criteria she created herself. There is no denying this fact, and Stratfordian academics and the Shakespeare industry based in Stratford have given no rational explanation as to why this should be the case. So I think that basically explains itself. I will leave you there. I just wanted to say I hope you managed to get to the end of that. It wasn't too long, I hope. But again, it's what there is. It's the fact that there's just a dearth of evidence, like a vacuum where there should be evidence, paper trails, records, historical records and so on, letters. There are really none for Shakespeare, and there should be. He was the most prolific writer of his time, author of his time, and a theatre champion of his time. If we are to go with groups like the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, the annoying thing, of course, for them is that they just don't want to acknowledge this, and it's really a pity that they aren't willing to debate us on this one. Anyway, I'll leave that there. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you and take care. I will see you again soon, and we will be looking into who is the most likely candidate for Shakespeare, and it's pretty much it's been concluded now that the individual is actually Shakespeare. Goodbye. Thank you. Enjoy your day.